I mentioned on the nighttime program with Andrew Bolt a couple of weeks back that I was surprised, and we checked a number of these, the number of universities, TAFE colleges, education facilities that are spending money advertising or sponsoring sporting clubs. Now, the sporting clubs love it because it's a guaranteed sponsor. The income's guaranteed. Many of these institutions are taxpayer funded. And so if you can grab a college like a Swinburne or a university, you would do it because it's roll gold income for you. The Liberal Senator James Paterson, who's a Victorian senator, raised this today. It was reported this morning in the Australian newspaper. And I congratulate him for bringing it up because you have to ask the question, why? Liberal Senator's on the line. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Steve.
Why are they spending money this way?
Well, they're competing with each other for students, and in a way that's not a bad thing. They should be competing with each other and offering a different and better service. But when they're doing that, they should bear in mind that they're spending taxpayers' money, and so the kind of advertising that they should do should be modest, first of all, and secondly, it should be about the merits of the courses that they offer and the education that they offer. It shouldn't be frivolous and unconnected to what they do. And as you say, if they're sponsoring sporting teams, I'm not sure what value that actually has to taxpayers.
It seems to be a branding exercise where they're competing against each other. Is that how this is unfolded?
I think that's right. And the scary thing about that is, do they really think that young students making up a decision which university to go to or whether to go to university and what to study are going to be swayed based on which sporting team they sponsor or don't sponsor? And if they are, what does that say about their suitability to attend university?
Yeah, no, I mean, clearly, and I've went through this the last couple of years where my daughter's ended up at ANU. She's gone there because of the course offered, and it's where she could get in based on her ATAR score.
Exactly.
There's no way that she was saying, Dad, Swinburne sponsor the Richmond Footy Club. I barrack for the Tigers. I think I might go to Swinburne.
I should say, Steve, I barrack for the Tigers, and I'm very grateful
to
every sponsor of the Tigers. But in this case, I think it's mostly taxpayers' money that's being spent, and I just don't think it can be justified, particularly when the government is proposing very modest reductions in funding to universities, and they are kicking and screaming and saying they couldn't possibly accommodate these spending reductions. Well, we say if they're spending $300 million a year on advertising, some of which is sponsoring sports teams, we think they can find some efficiency and some savings.
So the numbers are not insignificant, are they, Senator? I mean, $1.7 billion on marketing and promotions over the last 7 years. That's a hell of a lot of money.
It's an extraordinary amount of money. It's actually a reasonable proportion of that taxpayer funding which goes to universities. We all know also that universities certainly pay their vice-chancellors and their senior executive teams and management teams very generously, and I hope that they're all fairly and well remunerated, but for universities to say that there are no savings or efficiencies to be made really stretches credibility.
You've been able to track back the source of when this started to be a way to spend money? I mean, I can understand it almost if they were advertising or sponsoring sporting teams in China or India. It'd be easier to understand, wouldn't it, James, than here, because that's where the big dollars are coming from overseas students.
That's a very good point, Steve. Advertising internationally to earn money for universities in terms of international students is a very defensible thing to do, but as you say, a lot of it's happening here in Australia. To answer your question of when it started, universities have always advertised, but it expanded massively about 7 years ago when Julie Gillard, as Education Minister, went to a demand-driven system. So she uncapped the number of places that universities could admit students to and basically allowed them to compete. And there's many good reasons to do that, and there are many benefits from that, but I'm sceptical that advertising to people in this way and seeking students in this way is a good use of that money.
The issue of how much they spend, who checks that? I mean, is there any checks and balance, or is it just purely down to the institution's vice-chancellor or board or management?
Well, there are regulators that oversee universities, but they don't look at these sorts of things. They look at much more fundamental things about the quality of their education, for example, or adherence to basic standards. They don't try and regulate whether they spend money on advertising and how they spend it. But it's one of the reasons, certainly, that government is considering changing the way in which they're funded.
So how are we going to tighten this up? Because, as you said, your government is particularly keen on trying to to go to work on the budget deficit, to try and rein in spending. I mean, it'd be pretty easy to go to some of these universities and say, well, if you can afford to spend X on sponsoring a football club, maybe you could give us that money back.
I think that's a really good point, Steve, and one I'd love to expand upon, but I'm here in the Senate right now, and I'm about to go down to a division, I'm afraid, in the chamber, so I have to head down to vote. Thank you very much for having me.
No worries. Thanks for coming on the program. That's Senator James Paterson.